Teachers, what's the worst situation you've returned to after leaving the classroom? Showed up to my class a few minutes late to find the entire class, urged on by one of my final year helpers, had switched off the lights and hid in every nook and cranny of the room. One of them managing to get themselves stuck behind a sink pipe. Of course, I happened to be late because I was walking and talking with a depute head, who wanted an explanation from me as to what the hell was going on. A former teacher at the school where I taught last year had her coffee spiked with hand sanitizer on her first day with us. She didn't come back after that, obviously, and the dean of students told the 7th grade class who did it that she died to get the students responsible to come forward. It worked. Not my story, but a buddy I haven't talked to in many years. So he's a short little freshman in some sort of science class. Teacher stepped out for whatever reason. One of the older kids in class stands up and tells everybody to put their heads on their desks and act asleep. And he turns on one of the Bunsen burners just enough so you can hear an audible hiss. Teacher comes back, assesses the situation, and promptly picks up a bench and throws it through the floor to ceiling windows. Last year, while I had to do quick photocopies for the kids who forgot their documents, one of my grade 10 tripped and made a hole in the wall. It wouldn't be too bad if in their great teenager's mind, they didn't decide to make the hole bigger. I came back when they were figuring out if they could hide one of them in it. I was torn between laughter and anger. Edit. I'm still learning how to English. 9th grade health class. We were learning about CPR and teacher left the room. One kid took all of the infant CPR dummies and removed their heads. Hid the bodies in one place and just placed the heads all around the room. Teacher came back and obviously realized what had happened. Kid got in school suspension for a day I think, and we were not allowed to take the remainder of the CPR class because we were all considered too immature. My high school had this very old, like 70-plus-year-old man who taught economics and also was the ICE teacher. He could be quite blunt. He'd been in a war or two, had his wife die literally in his arms in their kitchen, and didn't grow up well in Saudi Arabia. So he could be a bit harsh at times but was generally hilarious and loved by a lot of students. Except one student who got ice daily. So one day while the old teacher had stepped out, the student got up and mixed liquid cement into his coffee mug. He ended up in the hospital for a while but survived. Student obviously ended up arrested and in jail. Not a teacher. Not a teacher. But in the 6th grade we had this English teacher who was always flying off the handle in a rage, and would slam her fist down on her metal podium like a gavel so the kids would shut up and sit down. One day, the teacher left class for whatever reason, and another kid in my class quickly went up to the podium and pulled out a screwdriver and quickly loosened every screw he could find on it and sat back down. Lo and behold, the teacher came back and eventually found the kids to be too talkative and slammed her fist down and the whole podium fell to pieces. It was a hilarious sight to see until the teacher started to cry. I felt bad, even if she was a mean old bitch. My high school biology teacher had a father in the ICU who was basically going through some major surgery and the odds of survival were low. She had her cell phone, which was a little flip phone that only got cell signal if placed in the windowsill of the window furthest from her desk, and was waiting for the hospital to call when he was out of surgery. Some turd child stole her phone when she went to get copies from the printer down the hall. Bruh, what a dick. Some of these are crazy. They'd look through the music on my phone and decided I was a loser. 18-year-olds. Doing A-levels. I didn't know whether to be angry or ashamed. Ashamed because you don't have your lock set on your phone. Not a teacher, but a guy in my class in high school drank hand sanitizer when the teacher left the room. Had to get his stomach pumped, I think. Egg on smartboard. When I was in 8th grade, my teacher had to step out for a phone call and everyone started talking amongst themselves. This kid was sitting in the seat closest to the door with his back to it, and right as my teacher opened the door to come back and he stood on his chair and yelled, "I may be a skinny Indian kid but I have a dick the size of Jupiter." He didn't see my teacher initially, but when everyone bursted out laughing and pointing at my teacher, who was now just standing there staring at him, he noticed and got super red. To this day I have no idea why he felt the need to announce that to the whole class and without him knowing. My teacher. 7th grade. English. Our teacher left to print some sheets. When she returned, we had turned off the lights and started to throw chairs and desks through the classroom. Not a teacher. But I've got a few stories. Semicolon. In 8th grade. A kid stuck a pencil in an electrical socket on the side of one of those science class tables with the outlets built in. Teacher came back and found him crying in a fetal position and everyone else pretending to read. Semicolon. In 11th grade AP History. We had a really cool teacher. She left the room to watch another class. We were AP students, so we were supposed to be more mature. While she was gone, we turned out the lights and hid in the corner of the room she couldn't see because of how the window on the door was shaped. It looked like we left. Dumb, but she thought it was funny. Semicolon. Senior year in health class. The teacher was also the football coach and was going back and forth between our class, while we were taking a test, and the locker room to monitor repairs that were being made. One kid stood on the desk to dance. Be funny. And the desk collapsed. He laid there on the floor crying while we pretended to take our tests. One girl crying from the stress of making up all her homework. Her 9 classmates gathered around her trying to console her. Semicolon. Semicolon. Not a teacher. My mother's senior class hired a hooker to show up at the school for the principal. Needless to say, the people who organized it weren't allowed to walk the stage on graduation. At graduation, everyone chanted to let them walk and basically rioted until they let them walk. It was a massive class. Edit. This comment got big. Think it's hilarious that nobody questioned the hooker but instead focused on class size. When I was in middle school, I had this classmate who really liked electricity. The more destructive forms of it. He always carried around this DIY shorting plug and he used to plug it into the school's sockets when no teacher was looking. One time, the computer class teacher left the classroom for some reason. Once he did that, the classmate got to do his thing. He plugged his plug into a socket, interrupting my UT 2004. I think it was a 2004. A version of Unreal Tournament. Anyways, match. And then he confidently walked up to the breaker panel, reset the breaker, and failed to restore the power. As it turns out, the breaker failed to do its job, and the guy's feat of circuit shorting actually burned cable in the school's electrical system. He was not punished for it either. None of us reported him. Snitches do get so-called stitches after all. And if the teacher had reported him, well, he'd have admitted to leaving a class full of students and full of computer equipment completely unattended. So he didn't. My 7th grade class spent a week messing with one teacher. I'm not sure why she kept leaving us alone. I think she may have had another class before ours where she had to be on the other side of campus. The first day, we hid in the workroom attached to her room so she walked into an empty classroom. The second day, one student hid under her desk until halfway through the class when she went to sit down, when he grabbed her ankle. The third day, we were all sitting at our normal chair connected to desks, with the whole unit flipped upside down. The fourth day, everyone whose desk was in front of a window had their legs hanging out the window and their heads stuck through so they looked like they were sitting at their desks but were halfway outside. The last day of the week, when she got there, we were all sitting in our normal seats, upright and in their normal rows, lined up outside on the walkway leading to the classroom. Joke was on us, though. She was accompanied by the Dean of Discipline. You guys were little shts. My math teacher in 7th grade had her coffee spiked with acid. You can't just say this and not provide a story and context. Obligatory, not a teacher, but was in the class. This was kind of intentional chaos. We were a GT, gifted and talented, class that combined AP English and History. We were about to start a unit on Lord of the Flies. And to create a demonstration on human nature, our teacher told us she was giving us free reign of the classroom for, I don't recall, 20 minutes? Sure enough, it was chaos. Two teams formed and leaders took their positions as butcher paper was ripped and made into weapons, projectiles, and desks were stacked to create walls of defense. Thankfully, we were good enough kids to not do anything that couldn't be easily undone. Or actually hurt anyone. Pretty damn cool experience when you follow it up with Lord of the Flies and see that those kids basically did the exact same thing without adult supervision. Not a teacher, but while I was at school, a student got up and started using the teacher's computer and found a load of child PRN on it. It was reported and the teacher left the school. I can't remember if the police were involved, as this was back in the 90s. We heard he ended up killing himself a few years later. The worst part. About a month ago, I was out for a meal with some school friends when one of them mentioned that she was still friends with the boy that found the PRN, and he told her that he had actually planted the PRN himself. Last year in my driver's ed class after school, a guy managed to have a seizure while there were no adults around. As far as I know, the teacher didn't get reprimanded at all. We had a substitute teacher that none of the students liked. He was a bully. I somehow managed to excuse myself to go to the bathroom and came back to absolute carnage. First thing I noticed that the tables and chairs had been thrown all over the place, and there was another teacher restraining a student, and the substitute was on the floor with a bloody nose. The other students were all stood around the room shocked. We were asked to go down to the library and not go to our other classes for the rest of the day whilst it was dealt with, and the teachers took witness statements from the students. I found out later from another teacher and a few friends that the substitute had mocked him over his father's very recent death that happened less than a week beforehand, and the student snapped and went for him. Taking notice and finally listening to our complaints, the substitute wasn't allowed back to the school and the student got a 1-day suspension. Not a teacher, but the school was debating removing our lockers and forcing us to have clear backpacks. The entire student body was in an uproar. All 4,000 kids. The principal agreed to a debate with the student council president, who was also captain of the debate team. And an absolute beast. When he found out this fact, he said he would only debate if questions were submitted in advance. The students disagreed, and he called it off. 2 days later, probably 97% of the students showed up with clear backpacks and a strip of duct tape over our mouths. All organized by our amazingly charismatic student council president. We kept it on all day and into the next day until they finally relented and told us they wouldn't institute the policy. Our class president was amazing. It's a shame he ended up a meth junkie at 23 and died in a robbery. Back in year 10, 13-14 years oldish, we had a fresh English teacher. Completely new to the profession and quite young, early 20s. This teacher wasn't a strong person and our class was known as one of the worst in the school. She'd get bullied and react poorly to it, essentially making it get worse. One time she left the room and someone blew up a condom and we started batting it around. She entered back into the room and started screaming for us to stop. Obviously we didn't. She started following it around the room trying to get it. After a few minutes she gave up and went to get someone higher up. So in comes an assistant head teacher. Right, pop that balloon right now. Full stop. For some reason her calling it a balloon caused us to erupt into laughter. She eventually got the condom and popped it and then took over teaching the class for the rest of the lesson. We didn't have the English teacher again much after that. A student drinking from a water bottle he found on top of a bookshelf that I knew to contain not water but perfume that I'd taken from the leaking perfume bottle of another student. He's fine. Just for your information. When it's too hot to eat lunch outside, each class eats lunch in their respective classrooms. Lunch is when the teachers get breaks. Ourselves and aides come in to either supervise lunch outside or inside the classrooms. On one such hot day, my co-worker stepped into her classroom for something during her lunch break to find that the aide had completely lost control of the class. and some Lord of the Flies tea was going down. Shelves and furniture literally overturned. Kids standing on furniture. Full-blown bar fight going on the group carpet. Etc. She has a plan house in her class, and when she walked in, there was one kid swinging out of it through the window, another attempting to climb the roof, and a third boy literally taking a piss inside. I heard my co-worker's voice bellowing from where I was eating in the break room as she regained control of the class. She said there were kids who she's never had to redirect twice participating in the total madness. My first year of teaching and my year 11 form decided to hang used tampons by the strings from the suspended ceiling tiles. Not a teacher. But in my Algebra 2 class we had a teacher that literally couldn't control any class. We came into class from second block to third only to find the teacher duct taped to her chair. Apparently the football douche and his friends in her low-level math class walked up with questions only to duct tape her to the chair. Only the one kid that did it got a suspension. But I remember our class would play hide and seek with her. One student runs out of the portable so the teacher chases them. Wait 15 seconds. Then the next kid runs out and hides outside. First kid comes back and teacher just says she upset they did that. Only to come to the realization that another kid has fled. This process repeated during testing time, so myself and another kid, Joe, would finish our tests and pass them around the class. It was not a productive period. Not me, but a schoolmate that I would soon become classmates with. It was first year high. Last lecture of the day. Their PE teacher just went to get her bag from the faculty office when this guy just couldn't hold it in anymore and shat on his chair. There was no way he or any sane person would use the dirty school restroom. Teacher came back only to see the whole class body going outside. I can see them go outside from my classroom. The culprit was inside, crying his heart out. Principal comes in to discreetly tell me to go outside with her because she wanted to hand me the air conditioner remote. She wanted to talk about a student. Don't really remember what exactly. I was probably gone for a minute. And the second I get back in, the entire board is wiped clean. It was a full board with graphs, formulas etc. I was actually proud of my straight lines. One student was standing up, now entirely silent, staring at me. He was holding my marker in one hand and razor blades in the other. Somehow, within 60 seconds, he managed to erase an entire board and half jam a bunch of razors in my marker cap so I would cut the hell out of my hand when I went to open it. In year 8, 12-13, my best friend at the time decided in the middle of an art class to get sellotape and tape his face in a distorted manner, and when the teacher came back and asked in a horrified tone, "What are you doing?" he replied, "I'm now a plastic surgeon," then ran in between tables screaming and laughter. The teacher sent us all out and we watched from outside as a female art teacher in her 50s and someone who the teacher's radio when kids are misbehaving chase a 12-year-old around a room for 5 minutes. I had a kid with autism who had just transferred from an out-of-state school. The kid did not have the skills to be in an inclusion classroom, but the powers that be were slow to get him into the program he should have been in. On several occasions I walked into the classroom to him screaming bloody murder because some minor thing had obstructed his routine. I was honestly impressed with my kids because several of them took it upon themselves to look out for him and try to keep him safe while advocating to every teacher they saw that he needed more help than he was getting. I was really proud of those kids. My 12th grade English teacher left to go make copies and a kid without hesitation locks the door from the inside with his belt. He then proceeds to give a lesson on how to fix car engines. Also not a teacher. And this isn't the worst, but a guy I was sort of friends with hid all of the teacher's stuff. I don't remember what exactly, randomly around the room. When he returned, he scolded everyone and asked for the stuff back, and the one guy just walked around grabbing it one by one and putting it back on his desk.